Tee time for the first round of the 118th U.S. Open is Thursday morning from Shinnecock Hills Golf Club in New York, with 9 of the last 10 major winners capturing a major title for the very first time. Can someone in this field make it 10 of 11? We'll go over this great field, preview the second major of the season with in-depth player analysis, course knowledge, the latest odds, trends, and picks as Prime Sports Golf on Prime Sports Network starts now. All right, you're listening to Prime Sports Golf for this Tuesday, the 12th of June, 2018, with Jeff Shane, Brady Cannon, and Joel Cook on the Prime Sports Radio Network. Prime Sports Golf is brought to you by ProGolfWeekly.com and Covers.com. Make sure to visit Covers Experts at experts.covers.com. You can take 50% off any purchase. Use the promo code PRIME50. That's PRIME50. So here we go, second major of the season, Jeff, and we've talked about this venue for over a year now. We're finally here, a couple of days to go. Real excited because of the fact that, I mean, everybody's here, and that's always great. Not just that, but we don't have one of the stars coming in winning like 2 out of 3 where they're like a heavy favorite and everybody, oh, well, I guess he's going to win again. This is just a wide open field with the greatest players, a lot of them playing well. This is going to be one of the best U.S. Opens ever, especially at this venue.
And the venue, I think, helps make that. And of course, it's a U.S. Open, so we're going to have a good mix of the big names. We're going to have a couple guys come from off the pace. We're probably going to have an amateur or two hang around on Friday or Saturday, particularly if they've got some sort of tie to the area or knows the course a little bit. In the end, though, it's probably going to be one of the top 20 players in the world. I think we all want that. What we also want is we don't want a Sunday that leaves a bad taste in our mouth. Whether it is what happened on Sunday at Shinnecock last time, where everything got baked out and the 7th green couldn't hold anything. But I think also we don't want a Sunday like last year, where it was just a dartboard and target practice, and the only question was how much was the record going to be challenged. Shinnecock is, I think the general consensus is there is one place to hold a U.S. Open every year. If that was the case, Shinnecock might be atop that list, and we're going to get a great test this week.
Yeah, I don't think that in any way Shinnecock can do anything to the golf course at all to give us the scoring, even if they wanted to, that we got last year. That's just impossible. So that's not going to happen, and that should make it interesting as we break down the field. I talked about this, so we went over this a couple weeks ago about how I just don't think when you're going over U.S. Open locations, past performances, that you can necessarily count the one last year. You can, but I wouldn't even put that too much into the equation. And as I welcome in Brady Cannon to the program, we can get started on talking about Shinnecock Hills, Brady, and I guess you would have to agree with me on that. Of course, as a handicapper, you are breaking down the field. We always like to go through past events, especially if they're at the same venue, but, majors, except for the Masters, different venues. So you do still use it because usually it's the same type of golf courses, but last year wasn't. So I don't think you really count last year's too much.
Yeah, I agree with you. I looked at the U.S. Open over the last 10 years because, like you say, you can get a general sense for the general setup of a U.S. Open. And that's really changed in the last 5 years or so. The needle-thin fairways and ankle-deep rough. The USGA's gotten away from that a little bit and trying to bring in a more well-rounded player. Driving accuracy is not so important as it used to be with the classic U.S. Open setup. And last year is a perfect example. The wind didn't blow there, so they weren't hoping for that result. But with the weather not being a factor, Brooks Koepka soared all the way to 16 under par. And, they didn't get the weather they wanted in Seattle either. For Chambers Bay. So they've had a couple of hiccups over the last few years, but like you and Jeff both say, I think they ought to hit a home run with Shinnecock this year.
All right, then talk about the course itself regarding the type of player that may best suit the golf course. We always, U.S. Opens, you think about probably putting more than anything else. So putting is probably a given. But what else? Besides putting and accuracy, I mean, it's usually putting and accuracy, even though that didn't happen last year. Again, that's just a completely different setup. But, you know, they talk about this being a very close to a links-style golf course.
Yeah, you know, putting and accuracy are going to be, you know, good clubs to have in your bag, so to speak, any week. But I think more so this week you're going to need total driving. You're going to need both length and accuracy off the tee. I think you'll need tremendous ball striking. You'll have to hit greens in regulation. They are smaller Poa annua surface greens with some runoff areas like we see at Pinehurst and Augusta, so scrambling will come into play. It's really going to take a little bit of everything. But like I say, I think the emphasis has been taken off a bit as far as just a premium on accuracy, like we've seen at some U.S. Opens in the past. And I also agree with you. You're going to see, you know, some links specialists do well this week because the course does have that feel. You know, the beachside bunkers, I mean, they really do look like the beach. And then you've got that British Open look off of the fairways with the wispy fescue. So I love, really, what Shinnecock brings here in what appears to be a combination of a lot of different styles, and I think that's going to translate into needing every bit of your game and every part of your game to succeed this week.
All right, well, what other handicapping tools are you going to use? You had mentioned Colonial a few weeks ago, so throw in a different type of handicapping tool you're going to use this week that you don't normally use.
Yeah, you know, I do often look to indicator courses or other courses that would translate into crossover success for the venue week, and I've done the same here in this case. And you mentioned Colonial. I also looked at Harbortown, where Jeff is down there for the Arbor Sea Heritage Tournament, where they're shorter courses, but you do need to be accurate. You do need to hit greens, and you have to work the ball in both directions. And then I've also looked at Pebble Beach and Torrey Pines because those are big, wide-open U.S. Open venues, Pebble Beach especially having a little bit of a links feel, but most importantly, they also have Poa annua greens. So I've looked at those four courses, and then also Pinehurst in 2014 where they held the U.S. Open there when Martin Keimer won. It's a pretty similar looking setup. It's you know, obviously has the forest and the trees and that type of thing, but it does have a little bit of a links look, a sand-based golf course, if you will, and the runoff areas around the greens. So I think in all of those five courses, you can take a look at who's done well at those different venues, and you should produce someone that should do well here.
Did you happen to find any particular player or players that seemed to circle or check the box, so to say, more than the others, where you went, hey, you know what, I think based on some of those other courses and what I'm trying to get here, this particular player or two fits?
Well, Justin Rose really jumps off the board. His stats are amazing. You know, he, statistically speaking, is probably the favorite this week. But, of course, he won at Colonial, which is one of the courses we want to draw from. He's done well at Pebble Beach before, and he's done very well at Torrey Pines. So not only is he good statistically, but he's got past experience on some courses that should shape up the way Shinnecock does. Ricky Fowler is similar. Not a great Poa annua putter, but he did do very well at Pinehurst, finishing second in 2014. He's in good form. He loves this golf course. He knows how to play in wind, and that's something you can look at, too. Who's had success in the British Open with the link style and the wind that should come off the coast here in Long Island. Now, it's not supposed to blow terribly hard, but I think you'll have a decent seaside breeze throughout the week.
All right, now let's get into some matchups. You have any good matchups for us that you like from what you've seen so far this week?
Yeah, I was looking at one earlier today, and that was, oh gosh, now I've got to find it here. It's escaping me. Okay, that was Fowler. I mentioned just over Jason Day, Ricky Fowler over Jason Day, and Fowler. Just showing here locally at even money. I don't know if that's the current price. And I mentioned that, there won't be as much importance placed upon accuracy off the tee, but I still think it is a big factor. And that's one thing Jason Day has struggled with, not only accuracy off the tee, but also his iron play. He's not hitting a lot of greens in regulation. Now, he is number one on tour in putting, and he's also doing extremely well in scrambling, but I figure to get to that point around the greens and approaching the greens, he's got to be good off the tee, and that's where he's lacking right now. And I think Fowler is very sound in all those areas across the board. So Fowler as an underdog to Jason Day looks pretty attractive.
All right, and any contenders or long shots that stick out to you this week? Because this is a pretty good week where there's just such a great field that anybody that is considered a long shot still a pretty good player.
Well, I agree with Jeff that the winner's probably going to come from the top 20, maybe even 30 deep in the world rankings. I think the cream will rise to the top, and like Jeff says as well, you're probably going to get a few one-offs, if you will, that are going to be in the thick of things, and that's where you might, have a good shot with a long shot. A couple of guys that I looked at are Emiliano Grillo, who's at about 125 to 1, just very sound in all aspects of his game. He putts well, he scrambles well, he's an excellent ball striker. About the only thing he lacks is probably a little bit of length off the tee, but he still hits it pretty well. And the way he's been playing, also played very well at Colonial with a third-place finish there. So, 125 to 1 looks pretty good on him. The one thing going against him is he does not have a ton of U.S. Open experience. This will only be his third time playing in the National Open. Now, on the other side of the coin, Steve Stricker's a long shot who has a ton of experience. And in his last 5 U.S. Opens, he hasn't finished worse than the top 25. So, of course, he's got 2 wins, 2 second places, and a 5th place on the Champions Tour this year, and his stats are really solid on the PGA Tour too. So at 150 to 1, I think Steve Stricker, there's a prop bet out there for him to finish in the top 20. I think that's a pretty good guess right there.
All right, what are you going to be doing? You're in Vegas, so what are you going to be doing for the event? You're going to head over to a casino?
No, I'll probably be watching in the comfort of my own home and enjoying some summertime by the pool and, dipping in back and forth from the TV in the backyard and just enjoying a Father's Day weekend for the U.S. Open. They say a tradition unlike any other for the Masters, but I love the Father's Day weekend with the U.S. Open.
And also, how are things going on over at teatimesusa.com?
Well, they're starting to slow down a little bit, but thankfully, knock on wood, not slowing down terribly. The weather is getting pretty warm out here. Today's supposed to be 105, so not a lot of golf being played, especially in the afternoon, but we're still getting some of those early morning rounds going out here in Las Vegas. But it ought to drop off pretty soon. Once you get to July and August, there's just not a lot of golf because it gets too hot.
All right. Well, enjoy the U.S. Open. It should be a lot of fun. Let's keep our fingers crossed that the coverage is good. But we at least know that after what we saw last year, we should get some real serious U.S. Open golf to have fun, enjoy watching. And we'll talk to you again next week, Brady.
Well, everything is setting up for it just to be a fantastic tournament. I hope we get that, and I hope we get a few winners. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Brady. All right, that's Brady Cannon. And again, Brady is, you can check out experts.covers.com. Take 50% off any purchase. Use the promo code PRIME50. That's PRIME50. And that is for anything. Doesn't just have to be for golf. You can use that promo code for any sport. But at this time of year, the NBA season's over. The NHL season's over. So this is what you get. You get, actually with NASCAR off this week, Jeff, this is it. This is. The U.S. Open. They have got center stage in the sports world.
Yeah, it really does, and good for the game of golf. Even golf has kind of pushed aside for the U.S. Open. There's only one other tournament going on. The LPGA is going to tee it up in Grand Rapids. They're in a stretch where they're in the heart of their season, but no champions. No Web.com tour, no European tour. Everything is focused on Shinnecock Hills, and honestly, that's really the way it should be in any major week. Nobody schedules against the Masters. Nobody schedules against the U.S. Open. It's a little different for the other two, but we know where all the focus goes.
All right, let's bring in Joel Cook from ProGolfWeekly.com. And, Joel, we were just talking about amateurs, and also I know when we get into our picks in just a couple of seconds, I want to get your take and Jeff's take, and I'll throw a name or two in there. Want to talk, see about whether or not we'll get ourselves another Lucas Glover champion, which we haven't had since Lucas Glover, or even a player like Xander Schauffele that comes out of nowhere to finish fifth last year. But what about amateurs, Joel? Can you give us an amateur or two that we should be keeping an eye on this week?
Well, I mean, it's been a while since any of them have gone into great contention here, but I know Doug Yim's one that's been pretty successful here lately. We saw Braden Thornberry last week at FedEx St. Jude. He had some good results there twice. Those are the two that stand out.
Who was that? Thornberry and who?
Thornberry and Doug Yim.
Who was that?
Oh, Doug Yim. He's 20.
Okay, who is he?
Oh, he's the former. Which Open did he win?
Well, he was the U.S. amateur runner-up to Doc Redman last summer. Could have even won it because he was up. He was 2 up with 2 to play before Redman put the blitz on at the end, and wound up having a good season at the University of Texas, and was the Haskins Award winner. They kind of have 3 Heisman-type awards in college golf: Haskins, Hogan, and Nicklaus. And Doug Yim was the Haskins Award winner this year.
All right. So those are the two?
Stuart Hadges. I'm sorry, go on.
No, those are the two?
Those two also, the listeners might be familiar with Stuart Hagestad from Stuart Hagestad. He was a former USC golfer, won the mid-amateur, was 36th at the Masters last year. He's the one. He was the one that was trying to just debate between different career options he's going into, but he's qualified for this one too.
Wow, what's his other career option?
Something in real estate. It was he had there was talk about whether he was actually going to turn pro for a long time. I'm trying to remember what his. I thought it was something to do with real estate sales, but
it was finance of some sort. Definitely. Okay. I forget whether it was.
Is he still deciding?
Wall Street or no? He decided to go back to school and get his master's degree in finance. I think it is, I suppose there's a lot more certainty in that than there is necessarily in golf. But he is an outstanding amateur golfer. He's kind of taking the Bobby Jones route.
All right. Well, if he can play as good as Bobby Jones, then I guess I won't have to say who's that. What's his name anymore?
It's a real estate firm he's working at. That's why I had real estate stuck in my head. But I believe he is in the finance sector.
All right. So we got a bunch of things to go over here: odds, analysis on the players, and so forth. But what we're going to do on this show, besides give our picks, which we've been doing every week, and then we give our top 3. We throw in our long shots, a player 50-1 or higher. And then we have our 2 alternates in case anybody fails to tee it up, which is possible. If they get injured, they pull a Dustin Johnson or something like that. So that's what we're going to do. Now, what we're going to do, though, on this week's show, okay, now remember I said this, we are just going to give our picks, period. No commentary. Picks only. And then we're going to go into analysis of the entire field, odds, and all of that. So I've got the first pick, and I'm going to go ahead and take Jason Day as my top pick at 18-1. You are next, Joel.
I'm going to go with Justin Rose this week.
Justin Rose, 14-1. Jeff, you're next.
I was hoping for Justin Rose. I'll take the other Justin, Thomas.
Justin Thomas, also 14-1. I'm going to go ahead then with my second and take another 18-1 shot, Ricky Fowler. Joel, you're next.
I was debating between Fowler there, so that makes it a little easier. Go with a good story. Let's
All right, give me your pick.
Sorry, Phil. Let's go Phil here.
Phil Mickelson,
33-1.
33-1. That's a big number. That's our first big number, and that's not a bad number. Jeff, who's your second pick?
I'll go another 33-1. Henrik Stenson.
Ooh, Henrik Stenson at 33-1. All right, my third choice. I am going to take Tommy Fleetwood, 40-1. Joel, third choice.
Third choice. Let's see what odds we still have here. Sorry, trying between a couple of guys there. I think I will go with. Let's go with Jon Rahm there.
Jon Rahm, 22-1, right? Still
Yep.
22-1. Jon Rahm. Okay, Jeff, third choice.
The Masters champion is hovering under the radar. Patrick Reed, 40-1.
2 majors straight. That's going to be a hard one, but you'll take Patrick Reed at a generous 40-1. That's a big number for Patrick Reed. Okay, long shot time. I'm going to go with Matt Kuchar, 55-1. Joel.
I like Alex Noren, 66-1.
Jeff.
Sorry, I was writing. Where is he? Patrick Cantlay, 60-1.
Okay, so those are our long shots. Now our alternates. These are the ones that are the favorites, under 50-1, in case anybody fails to tee it up. We can take duplicates in the alternates, just like we'd always get that one duplicate anyway. Just want to throw out some more rules in there. We could always take another duplicate, but we never usually do that. Okay, so especially here in this field, there's no reason to do it. All right, so my first alternate is going to be Hideki Matsuyama, 33-1. Joel.
Hey, why not? Let's take Tiger at 22-1.
Why not take Tiger at 22-1, Jeff?
He's got Tiger and Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take Bryson DeChambeau at 40-1.
Ooh, that would be a big story. Going with the repeat winners, the repeat majors, and the repeating back to back. DeChambeau, 40-1. All right. Alternate number 2 is our long shot. In case our long shots do not tee it up, I will take Brandt Snedeker, 100-1. Joel.
A couple of tough choices there. I think I'm going to go with let's go with Jimmy Walker at 80-1.
And finally, our last pick, alternate long shot, Jeff.
See, I was about to take Walker, so in the quick second scan of the list here,
Who are you debating?
Paul Casey at 50-1.
There you go. You like taking Paul Casey, and why not at 50-1? All right, there you go. Those are our picks. Now, tell you what, let's get that pick out as far as which player do you think, Joel, could be this year's Xander Schauffele, a player that we may or may not have heard their name much, even on this show, but you know for sure that if he ends up in the top 10, that the average sports fan will have never heard of him.
Well, there's a couple. It's a little difficult to find one that's quite as out of nowhere as Schauffele was. That was really surprising.
Another
last
one.
year.
Another one was last year with Trey Mullinax.
Yeah, actually, Trey Mullinax is just another one I was just about to mention. I know he was ninth last year. He's had 3 tournaments or he's kind of like all or nothing lately. He had a 6 at the St. Jude last week. He's second to Valero. He was one I was going to mention. Another one. This guy's probably the streakiest player, maybe the streakiest player in all of golf. He's considered a long shot, and he has the game of someone who's a lot better than that. Is Tyrrell Hatton. He's got a little streak of missed cuts going, but he's one of the best putters in the world. His iron game's good.
What game are you playing? Tyrrell Hatton.
Yeah, he's 150 to 1. Like I said, it was just really hard to find any super long shots there. And you mentioned Molinak at 250 to 1. He's kind of had that up and down. And also Lee Hao Tung. People know who he is now after that great U.S. Open, but he's still listed at 250 to 1 odds. He's shown up in some big events. The Dubai Desert Classic he's shown up in. That's another one that your casual golfer's not going to really know who that is when they see him suddenly into the mix.
Well, Jeff, go ahead and give us somebody.
All right, now this, and I'm kind of with Joel here. Is we talk about so many golfers that sometimes our view is skewed. Oh, we talked about that guy. Yeah, we've talked about him. We know him too. So I think everybody
we didn't know Xander Schauffele last year.
Better.
We never talked about Xander Schauffele.
Yeah, but and that's that's what I'm trying to find here.
I know, it's not easy.
Now, somebody that we have talked about very briefly back in the spring is Sam Burns, who I think is going to wind up being a mainstay on the PGA Tour. So we've talked about him. The general fan may not know much about him, but they will. And I'll give you another name, and he's down at 500 to 1. But this seems to be kind of time of year, and he's another one of those hot and cold players. But Richie Werenski is coming off a fourth-place finish last week in Memphis. He also has had a couple of top 25s at the Players' Championship and the Texas Open. And so, a Massachusetts native, so has played golf up in the area. So I'll put those two names on the list.
So, like guys like, I'll throw out some names I've never heard of before, and let me know if any of these guys are capable of being, again, I don't even know how young they are. Let's see, Noah Goodwin, Lanto Griffin.
Lanto Griffin's coming off the Web.com tour, and he's had a few pretty good finishes on the Web.com. He's actually one of those guys that has 1 foot in both tours.
Okay.
But he's played pretty decently. Could he be Schauffele? Anybody at that level could be.
Oh, sure. I mean, we didn't at all expect Xander Schauffele. I mean, look, putting the result together the way he did last year is one thing, but then playing the way that he has since then is completely different. And that's something that is just not normal. All right, now let's get a Lucas Glover before we go and start breaking down this field. A Lucas Glover, who actually, when I was going over over the past 10, 15 years, you have to go all the way down to Lucas Glover, which I think is the time when he won was probably like 70 something, I think, ranked, and that was the highest ranking of anybody to win the U.S. Open at that point in time between now and Lucas Glover. So I don't know how many years that is. 8 years, 9 years? So it just shows you that usually the cream of the crop does rise at the U.S. Open. But let's talk about guys that could be ranked somewhere around 75, 125, 150, like that could win the U.S. Open. Joel.
Well, I'm assuming Tiger's probably cheating.
Yeah, he don't count.
Actually, the guy
outlier.
Brandt Snedeker seems to play well in these kind of events. I know he's been.
Yeah, he don't count either.
Oh, he's 89th in the world,
he's not counting. He was hurt. Go ahead, give me someone else. You're bad at this game, Jeff.
Yeah,
I'll give Joel an opportunity to think some more. Jeff, I'll give you one. I'll give you two. Let me see. I gotta see. I actually have to see what their rankings are But I'll throw a couple of guys, and I'm not sure. I know they're not. Well, I know one of them or two. Well, yeah. Let me just throw a couple of names out there. And again, their rankings may not be that high. But here's a couple of guys that I actually have my eye on this week as long shots. Would be Chez Reavie. I could see.
I was going to mention him. Unfortunately, he's number 50 in the world, so I'm not sure he fits the category.
No, he's kind of like a combination of the two, where he doesn't have the name recognition too much, but he kind of does, and he doesn't have the ranking, but he kind of does. So he's kind of in that kind of halfway in between both of these questions I'm asking. But you get the gist there.
But I do think he's a very good comparison to Lucas Glover. Like I say, I was going to mention him until I saw, he's 50th in the world. That's higher than I thought he was.
And he's never, if you look at Chez Reavie, he has never in his career been ranked at the end of the year in the top 50. And he's 55 right now, as you said. So he is putting together a big he's got a good run going. He was 16th last year at the U.S. Open. That was his best major finish. He was 6th last week. I know, Joel, you've taken Chez Reavie quite a bit on this show as a long shot, haven't you?
I have. He can go low when you need him to. Actually, last year's U.S. Open, he had one really low round there, and he hits fairways, he hits greens. He's kind of cooled off a little since that hot start, but he looked good in places. And another one I mentioned, I don't know if this is probably closer to borderline. Keegan Bradley's number 69 in the world. That's pretty close to Glover territory. He's off back-to-back.
He won a major.
Yeah,
he don't count.
But no one remembers that. That was like 7 years ago.
Okay, and I do.
I remember that. I was there.
Go ahead. You got someone else, Joel?
I guess ranked too high. Everyone I thought looked good and ended up being ranked higher than I realized. Kyle Stanley's another one. He's 38th.
That won't work.
Thorborn Olesen, he just had a great outing out in Europe last week. He's ranked 73rd.
Okay, that's okay.
He's talented enough to pull off that kind of win. I think we've seen him kind of on the periphery of contention of a few majors too. But he just won the Italian Open, and he's had some other good finishes in recent years. He's got 6 career wins in Europe. Hasn't quite made his mark over here yet. But.
How about a guy that's only had like one win, one pro win? Because that was Glover. Glover was like 70-something. He only had one pro win, and that was at some. I think right now it's called it's the Shriners. I think they used to call it the Funai.
Oh, it's had a lot of names.
Funai, does that sound like something like the Funai 600 or something?
Oh, but that was Disney.
Yes, the Disney.
That was the old Disney tournament, the golf tournament with the Funai name.
Yes, that was it. So that was the first. It was the first event he won, and then he won the U.S. Open. So that's it. It's all he had before winning the U.S. Open. So any players like that you see?
Well, to be a little further down than 70th, the Scott Piercy has. I think he's got 2, and one of them was in at least one of those was in a field event.
That's not a bad one.
Right? Yeah, he's 3rd in strokes gained approach the green, 15th in greens in regulation. He contended at Oakmont a couple years ago when Dustin Johnson won. He's been in there before. His tee degree game is good. His putting is abysmal, but at this tournament right now, it's possibly that everyone's putting is going to be abysmal. Maybe it won't stand out as much.
Yeah, even though he's got 5 pro wins, fact is like you said, he's 181st in the world. So, that's really far down there. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about. Let's break down this field now, and the favorite is Dustin Johnson. Now, okay, he gets the big win last week, Jeff, and has the big Sunday. But don't you think maybe the odds, look, this also has to do with money. Don't you think the public might be getting a little bit carried away with him being 8-1 and the next player 14-1?
Probably so, and it was probably in the way that Dustin Johnson won in Memphis. He won by 6, capped off by literally a walk-off eagle to regain the number 1 ranking, and I think that was, it was a brilliant Sunday. But Memphis is a decent test. Don't get me wrong. They were I think they were 15th toughest out of 40 something, so top third on tour last year. But it's not a U.S. Open setup, and I think the U.S. Open setup is a lot different. And not only that, but there's this stat out there, and Brady mentioned it. There has been no player that has won the PGA Tour event right before the U.S. Open and then taken the Open Trophy the following week. And now Dustin Johnson is going to go up against that jinx.
Wow, that's not something that you want to be dealing with. But, hey, records can be broken. History can be made.
And that's the question. I think, at some point somebody's going to be the first. Is Dustin Johnson the kind of player that can be the first at a place like Shinnecock Hills? Obviously, there are a lot of people that think yes. By the way, the U.S. Open is the only major that fits that category. Phil Mickelson has won the week before the Masters and won the Masters. Tiger has won the week before the PGA and won the PGA. So did Rory. Phil won the week before the Open Championship and won the Open Championship. The U.S. Open stands alone in this category.
All right. Well, none of us have Dustin Johnson, so we don't believe it can be done. But Dustin Johnson does have a good resume. Matter of fact, he's got 3 top 5s in his last 4 trips to the U.S. Open, but he missed the cut last year after winning the U.S. Open the year before, 10th at the Masters, and also, again, runner-up in 2015. But, by the way, Dustin Johnson does not have a top 5 at his last 4 majors. All right, and then after that, we've got McIlroy, Rose, Thomas at 14-1. And, as Brady said, and then we talked about this, too, about a week or two ago when we were doing an early preview, Joel, where we were thinking, you know what, it wouldn't be a surprise to see Justin Rose as the favorite of the U.S. Open. So you like him. If you didn't take him, Jeff would have taken him. I was seriously thinking of taking him, but so that's how much we like Justin Rose. Now, keep in mind, he has missed the last 2 cuts at the U.S. Open, but he's playing maybe the best golf he's ever played, which is saying a lot. This is a real good player. A couple of notes, let's keep in mind that he has not had a top 10 at the U.S. Open since winning in 2013. And believe it or not, Joel, he doesn't have a top 20 in his last 7 majors, not including the Masters.
That was kind of surprising to see just because his game is so solid. You think he'll work anywhere. But right now it's really hard to bet against him. I mean, that tee to green game is just so pristine. He actually gained 15.8 shots on the field tee to green at the Fort Worth International lately. He's getting top 10s everywhere he goes. It looks sorry he missed those last 2 cuts, or at the U.S. Open. But one of them was Aaron Hills, which we can throw that out probably. And he's just an extremely safe bet. He looks confident. He kind of has like the right exact amount of experience that you need for this kind of event. And if you're making a list of the things you think are most important to win this U.S. Open, he seems to check more of those than maybe anyone else in the field. I'm pretty confident in him this week. But I wish his recent major history was a little bit better.
Yeah, I bet you didn't know this, Jeff, or wouldn't have thought of this, but Justin Rose, with his career, has only led going into the 4th round of a major twice. And even let's remember, when he won the U.S. Open in 2013, he didn't lead first round, second round, or third round.
And sometimes that's the way to be. Take the pressure off yourself. The thing that Justin Rose right now, as Joel mentioned, is that he's incredibly consistent. He's got 4 wins in the last 9 months. He was a winner just a few weeks ago at Colonial, which is, I think, a great U.S. Open tune-up type place. And when you look at the past 3 winners at Shinnecock, Raymond Floyd in 86, Corey Pavin in 95, and Retief Goosen in 04, the common thread between all 3 of those are they were supreme ball strikers who had the ability to, even if they weren't putting lights out, and it's tough to putt lights out at the U.S. Open, they were able to putt to save par and avoid the big numbers. And I think that's what you get more than anybody else with Justin Rose.
And by the way, Rose, as you said, 4 wins since October. Justin Thomas, 4 wins since August. And just like Justin Rose, even though, of course, Justin has a much longer career than Justin Thomas, but Justin Thomas has never led in any major at the end of a round, except when he won the PGA Championship in the final round. And yet we would think that's going to end real soon with as good as a player as he is. And the PGA Championship win last year, by the way, for Justin Thomas was his only top 5 ever, and still is, in 11 majors. Rory McIlroy, meanwhile, a 5th at the Masters, Joel, but that was a disappointing 5th. He came into the Masters going into that final round, 2nd place, and a lot of people thought with Patrick Reed ahead of him, with no experience in winning a major, that Rory was going to catch him and finally win the Masters and complete the cycle of all 4 majors. But disappointing, and that's been happening at Rory lately. He hasn't won a major in several years. And I guess we kind of understand that because none of us have taken Rory this week.
Yeah, I mean, I had him at the Masters. He looked great for those first 3 rounds, but he just looked so uncomfortable in that final group. I mean, some of it might have just been the pressure of the whole career Grand Slam thing. Like he mentioned, he hasn't been really in the mix of the other majors lately, and recently, when he's on, he's still maybe the best there is out there, but he is really not. It's been a long time since it seems like he's put 4 good rounds together. He'll have one really great round, a couple of really very good rounds, and then just one where he takes himself entirely out of the process. What is helping though is he's putting better this year than he has in recent years, and that could end up being some kind of equalizer. But yeah, he just doesn't look quite as comfortable as you would think someone with his resume would. I mean, obviously he's a good batting guy. I thought his odds were probably a little too high, 14-1. And that doesn't sound that bad, but having him in the same odds with Thomas and Rose and behind Day and Fowler, that didn't seem right to me.
Who would you take with the same odds, Joel? Would you take Dustin Johnson at 8-1 or Rory McIlroy at 14-1?
I think Justin at 8-1.
You would?
There's a pretty considerable difference there. Actually, on my rankings, I got my top 30 out on ProGolfWeekly.com. I have Dustin Johnson number 1 on there. The reason I took Rose is because I had them close, and the odds were a lot better.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense, Joel. Come on, man, show some guts. You should have put Justin Rose first.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it. Those are more power rankings rather than where I thought they were actually going to finish up.
So they're not Joel Cook power rankings?
Oh, they are. They are.
Well, then?
I mean, they weren't my predicted finish necessarily, but they were the ones I thought were best suited to win coming into this.
Okay. I still don't understand that theory, but you sure you don't want Dustin Johnson as your top pick?
It's really close. I just like with Rose's odds being nearly twice better, and
okay,
the way his iron game.
You don't go by odds
now.
on your power rankings, then, right?
No, those are just strictly who I think's got the best chance of winning. Otherwise, if it was my prediction to finish, I'd have some super long shots sprinkled in there.
Okay.
There's always a couple guys that are back in the 200s or so that just show off. But
okay. Jeff, who would you go with? 8-1 Johnson or 14-1 McIlroy?
I think I'd have to go with Johnson. I actually wonder if Rory McIlroy is built for the traditional U.S. Open. He does have a U.S. Open. It was on a very soft, rain-soaked Congressional where he was able to fire darts and wound up setting the Open scoring record. That's really the only time that he has played really well at a U.S. Open. He was 9th at Chambers Bay, but was never really in the mix. He goes out and he plays the Open Championship or the PGA or even the Masters, even though he hasn't won the Masters, And he can play that with a strong, long game that might miss a little bit. But the test of the U.S. Open, where they're going to mentally drain you, and going low is a statistical improbability, I don't think fits Rory McIlroy very well.
Jordan Spieth, none of us touched him, and that's not a surprise because he's just not playing well at all. And he hasn't even played very well at the U.S. Open besides his win. So, and Jordan Spieth, if you pick Jordan Spieth, you better be leading going into the weekend, because Jordan Spieth has led 11 of his 12 rounds played in all 3 major wins. Now, that's some serious front running. So if Jordan Spieth isn't at the top of your leaderboard by the weekend, after the first and second round at least, you're done. All right, Jason Day or Ricky Fowler, Joel, who would you take there? They're both 18-1.
I like Ricky a little better. I mean, actually, with my first pick there, it was the 2 guys I was trying to decide to most were Rose and Fowler, and I liked Rose a touch better.
So you liked Rose and Fowler more than Dustin Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, with the odds. I mean, if you get 18-1 odds on Fowler, I'd rather have him at those odds.
Yeah, that's twice as much. Sure, you're doubling the odds. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's 3 of the last 5 in the last 12 months. He's got 3 top 5s in majors. He's knows how to play these events well. He just isn't getting that win there, but. I mean, he's just under as much pressure as anyone to get that. I think we'll see him come through hopefully soon with that. I mean, Day, maybe if this was more of a scoring one rather than, I mean, I know Day's okay with bogey avoidance too, and Brady mentioned his short game is just absolutely unbelievable right now. If he's hitting fairways,
sure,
then he's going to.
Yeah, but I mean, don't you think though, Jeff? That's kind of the thing though. With a guy like Jason Day, it's interesting to note. Last year, like Dustin Johnson, neither of those guys even made the cut at that golf course, and yet Dustin Johnson and Jason Day seem to play better at the tougher golf courses. I know Dustin won the year before, and that course wasn't all that tough compared to the other ones. But Jason Day has been the runner-up at a couple of tough U.S. Opens. He seems to be able to play well at tough U.S. Open golf courses.
Well, let's put it this way. He's had 7 U.S. Open appearances, and he's finished in the top 10 5 times.
Yeah.
He's got a game made for the U.S. Open, but maybe he doesn't have a game made for a U.S. Open that isn't a U.S. Open. and maybe that's what got both of those guys in trouble is just, they didn't put the pedal down and go low enough early enough.
Sure.
And they wound up getting boat raced. That was not a U.S. Open at Erin Hills, and I think maybe that has something to do with it. The interesting thing with you mentioned Dustin Johnson, had won the year before, and it wasn't the toughest U.S. Open. Well, it was Oakmont. Oakmont's always tough. It's just a question of how tough they want to set it up.
Yeah, that's true.
Gee, Oakmont and Shinnecock, if you were to put together a rota of U.S. Open courses, where you're going to play 8 of the next 10, those 2 are automatics, and probably number 1 and number 2 on the list. So.
Yeah, so, by the way, not only was Day runner-up twice, but he also, which was 2011 and 2013, but he also led after the 3rd round in 2015. So he's had a lot of success at the U.S. Open. Ricky was 5th last year, runner-up in 2014. He was in first place last year at the end of the first round, runner-up again in 2014. And we all know by now that Ricky Fowler is, as far as this field, he is the leader with the most top 5s in majors. He's got 8 without a win, including 3 in his last 4. The reason I was willing to go back to Ricky after staying away from him for the past month was because he had a very solid showing his last time out a couple of weeks ago, and his putting started to come around again. Once I saw that, I felt pretty comfortable that at 18-1, not a bad way to go for Ricky this week. Let's talk about Tiger and Phil, Jeff.
And by the way, and it's Ricky's first start since getting engaged.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure that maybe. Well, hey, he hasn't won a major yet, so that could be a good thing.
He might need the
distraction.
But that could help him.
He landed a trophy of a different type last week.
Yeah. So, as you said, Joel, maybe the distraction will be a good thing for Ricky Fowler, take some of the pressure off. And so far from from the coverage that I've seen, not hearing a whole lot about Ricky compared to the other players. Oh, is Ricky going to win the big one? And let's do a whole 30 minutes on it. And it's also a little earlier in the year. Maybe they'll start putting more pressure on him if he hasn't won the major by the Open Championship, or the PGA Championship, I should say. Okay, Tiger and Phil. So you have both Tiger and Phil, Joel. Mickelson 33-1, Tiger 22-1. Look, Phil is definitely a good play. We've talked about that for a few weeks. His putting has been fantastic. Sure, he can't find the fairway most of the time this year, which is normal for him. Yet, he's been able to find it a little bit better than last year, the last couple of years. And most importantly, besides the putting, is he's a solid scrambler. And we would also assume at this particular golf course with his smarts, Jeff, and the way that he can just think this golf course through, that he knows there are going to be situations where he's going to be here, he's going to be there. He's already plotting all that out. I mean, nobody strategizes holes like Phil Mickelson. And because of that, I think that's where you have to give him an edge over a lot of these other players. I mean, nobody's going to outthink Phil Mickelson this week.
The only person that may outthink Phil Mickelson is Phil Mickelson, and we've seen that happen.
Sure.
But you're right. I mean, he's as familiar with Shinnecock Hills as anybody. He is one of only 5 players in the field who not only played the 04 Open, but also the 95 Open at Shinnecock Hills. So he's had 2 bites of the apple. And by the way, he's finished in the top 5 both times. He was tied for 4th in 95, and then obviously he was runner-up to Retief Goosen in 04. So Shinnecock Hills has been kind to him, and I think you're right. I think when a course gets a little bit more subtle, and you know that you got to avoid this particular quadrant of the green, and you don't want to get in jail over here, that's where Phil Mickelson really shines. And I think that since the restoration of Shinnecock Hills as well, Ben Crenshaw and Bill Coore went in and kind of restored it closer to the original dimensions that William Flynn had back in the 1930s. Fairways are a little wider than they were in the last 2 Opens. That should help Phil. And that the greens are also going to be a little bit bigger, which means there's going to be, I think, a lot more lag putting. But also, those pins may be tucked to places that they weren't in 04 and 95 because of the added green space that was recovered by the restoration.
Good sign for Phil, too, was his 65 on Sunday. And you could tell us, you just felt that where he was in the field, it was almost like he went out there and because we know how a lot of these golfers before a major, some of them just don't even want to win. And you just get the feeling that once he started playing well and at the end of that round and played as well as he did on Sunday, that it was almost like he was already playing the U.S. Open. It was like, all right, now I'm ready. I'm not even worried about what I'm doing here. I'm not going to win anyway, and I don't care about it, but I'm just going to go out, and I have to really start gearing my game up. And Phil went ahead and played really well to finish 12th. Keep in mind, Phil, though, just won top 20 in his last 8 majors. That was the runner-up British Open to Henrik Stenson in 2016. including in that last 8, are 4 missed cuts. And if you look at the last 4, actually the last 6 U.S. Opens, he only has 1 top 25. That was a runner-up in 2013. Tiger, meanwhile, Joel, has not led a major since round 2 of the 2012 PGA Championship and doesn't have a top 10 in majors since the 2013 Open Championship. Yet you went with Tiger at 22-1 as your top alternate with some other players out there. Why'd you do that?
Well, it did help that it was an alternate. I'm not sure how super comfortable I was. I mean, he definitely has temperament for it and all that. Just his putting was just so bad at the Memorial, but I mean that can kind of be a variable thing. He had been putting fairly well going into that, but yeah, tee to green, if he's hitting fairways, he's doing really well. He ranks really highly. Approaching the green, greens in regulation, around the green. I like that part about him. I just hope that he can be in the fairways because that rough is pretty tough to get out of. But,
yeah.
Tiger's as good out of there as anyone.
Well, Jeff, I don't know with Tiger. It would be nice just to even have him in contention. I would have thought he would have had a chance to win this had he been playing like he was a couple months ago, 6 weeks ago. He's just not. He hasn't had a top 10 since Bay Hill. You just can't play like that coming into this venue. I just think it's asking way too much for Tiger, especially at 22-1. I mean, Tiger really should be like 50-1.
Yeah. Well, I could see if Tiger and Phil flipped their odds. If Phil was 22 and Tiger was 33, I could buy that. But 22, coming off that performance at Memorial where he was next to last in the putting, and I'm sure that Tiger has worked extremely hard on his putting in the last couple of weeks, but and I've mentioned it before, right now his game isn't traveling. All 3 of his top finishes this year took place in the state of Florida, and familiar setups, familiar greens, all of that, and then when it seems like when he crosses the state line, something happens. And even at places where he has played well before, like Muirfield Village, it hasn't worked for him, and he's still trying to find the magic somewhere else. Now, that's a little esoteric. Maybe this is, too. Tiger Woods has never won. He's got 3 U.S. Opens, but he's never won a U.S. Open on a private golf course.
Okay, that is pretty interesting.
For whatever reason, his 3 U.S. Opens have all been on public access golf courses. Pebble Beach, Bethpage, and Torrey Pines, 2 of which are in California, where he grew up. So I don't sense that Shinnecock, is a fit where he's going to all of a sudden flip the switch and win. And that's not to say that Tiger, with his ball striking, and if he strikes it well, can't put himself in a spot to have a good top 15, top 25 finish, but. Right now, his game is not to where it needs to be to win a United States Open. It just isn't.
Joel, which way would you go between Patrick Reed at 40-1 and Hideki Matsuyama at 33-1?
I mean, they're both good. I like Hideki better just because of recent trends. Hideki seems to be. I mean, I know not all the stats are there for him yet, but he seems to be healthy again. He has had some very low rounds. He hasn't had a lot of low consistent rounds. But and Reed, Reed's kind of streaky. Actually, everything Matsuyama too. He finished top 15 in all 4 of the majors last year, so he really wants one of these pretty badly. I mean, Reed, obviously, I think 40-1 odds are absurdly good for how good of a player he is and how many high finishes he has this year. He had those 6 top 10s, and he's just kind of fallen off these last few weeks. I'm not really sure if there's any huge reason for concern, but if I'm looking at those 2, I think I'm going to go with the trend. And Matsuyama seems to be on the way. coming up.
Yeah, keep in mind, Patrick Reed not only won the Masters, but was runner-up at the PGA. Those are his last two majors. That's pretty impressive for a 40-1 shot, while Tiger's 22-1. Hideki Matsuyama, meanwhile, second last year. And as you mentioned, Joel, he's been doing really well in the majors. 6 straight top 20s in majors, including 3 top 5s, a runner-up at last year's U.S. Open that I mentioned. He hasn't won since August at the WGC Bridgestone, but 7 wins since 2016, and he is starting to play better over his last 2 events.
Yeah, his last 8 rounds, he's got 3 of his last 8 rounds were 66 or better. He's just got to put it back together consistently. Yeah,
and keep in mind the last 2 winners of the U.S. Open had not won that calendar year. So you don't necessarily have to have a streaky winning player heading into the U.S. Open. Let's talk, Jeff. What do you think about Jon Rahm at 22-1 right now? John, I think the one thing that I'm a little bit hesitant with John, who is Joel's third choice, is a couple things. First of all, he's never won a big event yet. I mean, the biggest event he won was Torrey Pines, so he hasn't won a big one yet. And he was 4th at the Masters, which is good, but it's also the first ever top 20 in his 7th major. And then most importantly for me, he's only been in 2 U.S. Opens. And usually you've got to be either, you have to have a good, career at some point in U.S. Opens, as far as experience, or you have to have some good results. Now, 23rd a couple of years ago was okay, but he's never contended for. Yeah, but he's never. He's only been there twice, and he's only played 6 rounds, and he's never contended for a U.S. Open. So I'm a little bit worried about that. And this is what you got to do when you got to nitpick players.
That's true. I'll say this: in his first U.S. Open, Jon Rahm was 23rd at Oakmont, and that means something to me. Now, it does, and what we've seen in Jon Rahm over the past 2 years, kind of starting with Oakmont, because that was pretty much when he turned professional, is that he's been very good, by and large, at adapting to unfamiliar golf courses. And for Shinnecock, it's going to be unfamiliar to all but about 24 players. I think there are about 24 players that played in the 04 edition, and so they remember that, for better or worse. And then, as I said with Phil, there are 5 that actually also played in the 95 edition. So I think Rahm is still kind of growing into his game. I'm kind of torn, actually, because he does not have the experience. He does not have the finishes. But remember that he went over to I forget what it was, Ireland or Scotland last year, played on an unfamiliar golf course and won. And it's not a U.S. Open. I get that. But he's going to find a very similar type golf course at Shinnecock. And so I'm kind of torn on him. Actually.
Who would you take between Rahm and Koepka? They're both 22-1.
Right now, that's a tough one.
Because Koepka,
I don't think
it's going to be hard to win back-to-back U.S. Opens. Let's first point that out. But I mean, Rahm doesn't have the major quality results that Koepka has. He's got 7 straight top 25s in majors. In 12, and including 12 top 25s in his last 14, and that includes 4 career top 5s.
Yeah, and I think based on resume, Koepka really would be the pick. But there's something about the crown on the defending U.S. Open champion's head as well. Since 1991, only 6 defending champions have finished in the top 30. And there are theories abounding as to why. And of those 3 or of those 6, 3 of them were by Tiger Woods. And so you take him out of the equation, and you have Graham McDowell, Justin Rose, and Retief Goosen. That's it. Since 1991, the defending U.S. Open champion can't seem to finish in the top 30. I think Brooks Koepka is better than that. I think he's definitely got a chance to finish in the top 30. But that's what he's going up against this week in terms of U.S. Open hexes.
Joel, who would you go with? You can go with either Henrik Stenson, Brendan Grace, both 33 to 1, Tommy Fleetwood, 40 to 1, or Paul Casey, 50 to 1.
Between those, I like Stenson a lot. I'm not sure why he's not getting more coverage. He leads the tour.
He never gets any coverage.
Yeah.
He's always under the radar.
You're talking about a guy who's first in driving accuracy, first in greens regulation, first in bogey avoidance. I mean, those alone just kind of look like a U.S. Open champion right there. And he had the Olympic silver medal recently. He's got a major under his belt. I mean, this is if the wind picks up, he knows how to play there. So I mean, I'd rank him first pretty comfortably out of that group. I mean, Fleetwood's kind of got something about him too. He could very well be that next first-time major winner here. The other two, Grace has looked better lately. Casey has got a pretty low ball flight, and he's pretty desperate for a major. But I mean, Stenson just. I know it's hard for me. As solid as he looks and as accurate as he looks, he's going to keep himself out of trouble in the tournament. And that's a really important thing to do at the U.S. Open, especially ones that look like they're.
All right. Why does your voice keep dropping down at the end when you're about to stop talking?
It does. Oh, I didn't know.
You go like this the whole time, and then you go, and then it's over. What's that about?
I do not know. I will have to.
You don't know? You're not doing anything differently?
No, I didn't realize I was doing that on purpose. I mean, it's hard for me to sit still, so sometimes I'll kind of walk around, thinking a little bit. But so some of that might be, the cell reception coming in. But yeah, I got to make sure I'm more cognizant of that.
Well, again, it's always towards the end. It's always just before you're about to end your comments. Then, try to put more emphasis in there because people can't hear what you're saying. I can hardly hear what you're saying, but that's okay. It is what it is. All right. Let's. By the way, if you look at this, Stenson, I think part of the reason with Stenson, again, as I said, he doesn't get. Look, he always is under the radar. He's just not one of those big stars that everybody pays attention to. He's only won once, by the way, since the Open Championship, so we do have to remember that. So not too much of a surprise that he's kind of going under the radar with so many great players in the field and playing well. You take a look at Paul Casey, and Casey, let's not forget, he led at the end of the second round last year, but then weekend 75-74, and that was the time that Paul was just not playing well on the weekends and in the final round. Up until the win this year, he's still, he's playing the best. I mean, look, 25 top 25s in his last 30, with 7 top 5s and a win worldwide. And he's only missed one cut in that stretch. So he's been fantastic. Not winning a lot, but he's been there a lot. And now that he's got the wins schneid off the off of the belt, then maybe at 50 to 1. I'm actually surprised he's a long shot this week with those kind of numbers. Jeff, who would you go with? Tommy Fleetwood at 40 to 1, or Brendan Grace at 33 to 1?
I think Fleetwood probably is closer to having a major winning game than Brandon Grace. Now, Brandon Grace had a great finish at Chambers Bay 3 years ago, and that's kind of when we first kind of sat up and said, oh, Brandon Grace is ready for the world stage. But I think Fleetwood has been the more consistent player. He's going to be probably in a little bit more familiar territory because of the links-type conditions that we're going to see at Shinnecock. And Fleetwood has also played very well at U.S. Open.
Yeah, you surprised that Grace is getting better numbers, 33 to 1 to 40?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that may be one of those things where perhaps they remember his finish at Chambers Bay, although that was 3 years ago, and his game has ticked in the positive direction here in the last few weeks.
Yeah, he actually led third round at the end of the third round of that 2015 U.S. Open. Fleetwood was fourth last year. He led at the end of the second round, and that is one of the main reasons why I said, okay, I think I can go with him. I know he has only one top 10 since his win. Since finishing fourth at the Honda in February. But he's been playing okay. I mean, he still has a bunch of top 25s, and I'm okay with that.
And that top 10 was at the Players' Championship, which is another event that's going to test every club in your bag.
All right. What about? Let's see. You mentioned Snedeker for something, Joel. So who would you go with, Snedeker or Kuchar? Kuchar 55-1, Snedeker 100-1.
Probably Kuchar. I mean, I'm not thrilled about it. I mentioned Snedeker because of where he was in the rankings. I thought he might have qualified for the thing you were talking about, but I guess he's a little higher regarded than that. I mean, both of them have played well in majors in the past. Kuchar is just kind of isn't really looking all that great to me lately, but in the majors, especially lately, he had that at the Open last year. He took Spieth to the end, and he's got 10 career top 10s in majors. I'd go with him by nose just because. I mean, Snedeker doesn't look all the way back to me still, but his game fits it pretty well.
Yeah, that's the reason why I figured I'd throw him in there, because he did. I mean, his sixth place finish last week was his first top 10 this season. And we know he's still kind of trying to get back into his game after the injury. So maybe the timing fits the fact that he's been very good at U.S. Opens with 7 top 20s in 11 attempts, including 5 top 10s. So I figured at 100-1, why not?
Actually, he killed that second round last week, too, at TPC Southwinds. I mean, he might not be able to put it together consistently yet, but 8 under for that second round was really impressive.
Yeah, he's been disappointing so far. Matt Kuchar, though, fourth at the Masters last year, runner-up to Spieth at the Open Championship last year. And we also have to remember, Jeff, that Matt Kuchar, when you look at his major history, you can kind of draw a line through it after his first 10 years, because he was awful. Yeah. In the majors early in his career, and he's been a completely different player over his last, 7 years?
Yeah, really, I think 2010 is when he started not just majors, but overall became a consistent golfer that was going to be in the top 20 of the world rankings consistently. It was going to be a contender for FedEx Cups, and was also going to be part of Ryder Cups and President's Cups. He just became a different player, got with the right coach at the right time, and everything fell into place. And I'm one of those that believes that Matt Kuchar has a major in him somewhere, sometime. And and his major performances have been very consistent. We know how close he came, except for that all-world bogey by Jordan Spieth, lighting a fire. We might have seen Matt Kuchar last year at Royal Brookdale. But I think that his game is at least the in the last 8 years, has been made to withstand majors. He's gotten better at being on that stage. And again, whether it's Shinnecock this week or maybe it's someplace else, a PGA Championship, he's going to get his. It's a question of when.
Who would you go with, Jeff? Alexander Noren at 66-1 or Jimmy Walker at 80-1? I guess what worries me about Noren is, as I said with Rahm, and Noren's in worse shape than Rahm, Noren has never played well in U.S. Opens. As a matter of fact, he's missed 4 out of 5 cuts and has only got 2 top 10s in 18 career majors, even though he's playing some of the best golf of his career. Jimmy Walker's got the wire-to-wire win at the PGA Championship a couple years ago. He's got 5 straight top 20s this year, including a runner-up at the Players. But he hasn't played well at the U.S. Open the last 3 years.
Well, and I think the last couple U.S. Opens, included the effects of having that Lyme disease. So we got to be a little careful about that. I think Walker has developed into a very consistent player. It surprised me when he went wire to wire at the PGA, but that just shows you how good his game can be. And I think he's getting healthy right now. And getting healthy, I think, maybe has freed him up a little bit. He doesn't have to worry as much about conserving his energy and eating all the right things and taking whatever antibiotics he had been on. And his game has really kind of stepped up. In terms of looking at the long shots. I took Cantlay. If Cantlay wasn't there, I might have taken Walker. At that point, okay. I'm bullish on Walker.
As far as the remaining field, players that we did not take or talk about, I would go with the players that I was considering. I was definitely considering Francesco Molinari. How can you not? First and second in his last two, 60-1. Runner-up at the PGA last year. That's the first top five as a major. 20th at the Masters. So he's playing better at majors, and he's a top 20 player worldwide right now. So he's definitely got a major possibility in him. Webb Simpson, can he pull a Martin Kaymer, win the Players, and then also win the U.S. Open? That's possible. Why not? Webb 66-1 if you can put it all together. Only thing is he hasn't had a top 10 in the majors since winning the 2012 U.S. Open. But I was thinking about those players, and I was thinking about Ian Poulter. He was my third long shot choice after Kuchar and Snedeker. Poulter was fourth in the 06 U.S. Open after the third round. So he was in contention there, finished 12th overall. Got the win this year, getting off the Schneid, first win since 2012. He's got 6 top 20s in his last 7 with 4 top 10s, 2 top 5s, and a win. So 125-1 Ian Poulter. I was thinking about grabbing him. And then we talked about Chez Reavie. I'm going to put a buck on him at 200-1. And I'm also going to put a buck on Luke List at 150-1. Now, get this. Luke List and Lucas Glover. Lucas Glover, who won in 2009, in his previous 3 U.S. Opens, all missed cuts, and 1 pro win. Luke List, 3 missed cuts at U.S. Opens, 1 pro win. So there's some similarities there. Joel, who else did you leave off the board that you were considering?
Well, it's a major, so you have to consider Louis Oosthuizen. At 60-1, it's pretty good considering how often he's gotten himself well in contention for it. I mean, he hasn't played that great on a consistent basis for me to be super confident in him, but he seems to kind of take it up a little bit here. You mentioned Molinari. How about the guy who almost won last year, Brian Harman, co-leads the PGA in top 10 finishes, but he hasn't had one in a while. And he's been all over the place lately. He's got his last 10 rounds. There's a 64, 67, and a 68 on there, but he also has an 80 and an 81 in there recently. So I'm not really sure where he is, but you can see him go. I can see him going off pretty good in either direction. But I consider those two quite a bit. Duffner I always like on shot-making courses, but he just seems to he's fallen off a bit these last few weeks. I was really disappointed with him at the Memorial.
Okay.
Those are the ones I was probably most closely considering that I didn't take.
Jeff?
Well, I will endorse Oosthuizen and Poulter and Webb Simpson. Webb Simpson, he's 6th on the PGA Tour in putting this year. I kind of see him in that kind of bulldog Corey Pavin type mold as well. So
and he's second in scrambling.
I certainly gave him. Yeah. So I'm a little gun shy about, he just won the Players, and I was going to win the U.S. Open, too. Of course, I felt the same way about Martin Kaymer 4 years ago. So, anyway, Kyle Stanley, I think, has been playing very consistently well, and he's only a couple weeks removed from a playoff loss at the Memorial when he just got some horrible luck. on the 18th hole with his tee shot at the end of regulation. So Stanley's playing well. So I was looking at him. List I looked at, and Reeve as well. I think those were all kind of in that same boat. When you get down in the long shot area, it's like, who can deal with the adversity that you are going to endure for 4 days, and those are the type of guys that I think we all were looking at this week.
All right, other guys we haven't mentioned, prominent guys like Sergio and Bubba Watson are both 50-1. Sergio is just not playing. This is the worst that Sergio is the worst streak Sergio's had. I haven't looked at it. I don't think I have to. I don't think he's played this poorly in his last 4 events in probably 2 years. He's got 3 missed cuts and a 70th. So he's also never led a U.S. Open. So I don't think this is the year to go with Sergio. Bubba Watson, meanwhile, only was 5th at the Masters this year. His only top 20 in his last 13 majors, and he only has 1 top 10 in 11 U.S. Opens. So you can see why we stood away from Bubba and Sergio at 50-1. Mark Leishman, I'm surprised you didn't mention Leishman, Jeff, at 60-1. You like Mark Leishman. He was runner-up at the Open Championship in 15, 9th at the Masters after he was second after the second round. And he's won twice. He won twice last year, including Bay Hill. So why didn't you like Leishman?
Well, I suppose it's just Leishman fatigue. I've picked him a lot this year and not gotten the result.
That'll happen.
Of course,
that's why I left.
And of course there's the possibility if the wind picks up at Shinnecock, he could be right there.
Yeah, Finau, as Joel mentioned, 10th at the Masters, does have 4 top 20s in 8 majors. I bet you most people wouldn't realize that. Adam Scott, 66-1, but he only has 1 top 10 since June, and I'm talking last June. So that's not good. Charles Schwartzel looks like his game is back in the crapper. After a 78-75 weekend, he's 80-1. And Sander Schauffele, 5th last year, as we talked about earlier in this program, but he's missed 2 straight cuts. So at 100-1, maybe not the way to go. Let's see, who else do we have here? Ernie Els will be playing. He got that exemption, right, with Furyk, Jeff?
Yeah, and as it turns out, they also put him in the same grouping.
That makes sense. And by the way, the reporter, unless I missed something, the guy who started the program on Thursday or Friday on the Golf Channel talked about Retief Goosen getting ready for next week. So that's a mistake, right?
Well, that might be next week when they go to the Travelers Channel.
Nice try. No. He made a mistake. He made a boo-boo because Retief Goosen is not in the U.S. Open field this week. But I'm sure he probably – now, look, you're a golf analyst. I would hope that your job is golf 24/7, all week long. Maybe it's not. Maybe he does something else for a living. Maybe he's like a hockey referee. Maybe he has another job except for his golf analyst work. But you got to know these things. But it's a surprise. You would think that Retief Goosen, especially if Ernie Els and Jim Furyk are getting exemptions, and we talked about this last week, Jeff, you would think Retief Goosen would have got one.
The Bluecoats are a hard bunch to please. And think about it this way, too. It's taken this long for Ernie Els and Jim Furyk to get those special exemptions. Jim Furyk is 15 years removed from his U.S. Open title at Olympia Fields. Next year will be 15 years for Retief Goosen. Maybe they'll let him into Pebble Beach. I don't know.
All right.
Just imagine if Tiger's not in it next year.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough one for them.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. But, hey, you never know.
It could be one of those things where if the USGA gives the exemption to Tiger Woods too soon, everybody will be up
Oh,
in
sure.
arms. And you know what? All Tiger Woods needs to do is move up into the top 60 in the world rankings, and we don't have this conversation.
Well, he's gonna.
But,
yeah, well, I look at it more as I don't think that. Tell you the truth, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they would give him an exemption, but I just think it would be a surprise, unless he gets hurt, that he doesn't find a way in and he doesn't need the exemption one way or another. He's going to play well enough. I'd be surprised if he doesn't play. He's just not on a nice run now, but that's okay. I mean, that's just the kind of player he's going to have to be. Matthew Fitzpatrick is not playing good golf lately. He just won top 10 since January. And Brian Gay might be a nice little long shot. He's 300 to 1. He's moved up from 562nd in the world to start 2017. Now he's 145th. By the way, Lucas Glover, speaking of Lucas Glovers, he's in the field, the 09 champ. Zach Johnson, looking for a third major, is 151, along with your boy Terrell Hatton. And you were going over Hatton's bad play, Joel. 8 missed cuts in 12 majors. Not good. And he's got...
That's true. The ones he didn't miss the cut, though, he was really good, and he's just so up and down. It's hard to tell what you're going to get with him.
And he's 3 missed cuts this year. 3 straight miscuts this year, and 4 in his last 6, with a 42nd and a 44th. So he's not playing well. Definitely. Rafa Cabrera-Bello wouldn't be a bad idea this week. He's 100 to 1. He's trending in the right direction. 3 straight top 20s, 2 straight top 10s, 4th last time out, 4th in the Open Championship last year. But he's never really done well at majors, but he is 100 to 1. Steve Stricker, we've mentioned him. Jim Furyk, Kevin Kisner's 150 to 1. Peter Uihlein has been playing some pretty good golf. He's 150 to 1. Charlie Hoffman, 4 top 25s in his last 5 majors. It would not be a surprise to see Charlie Hoffman on the first page of the leaderboard this weekend and then finish 28th on Sunday because he's just not playing well. I would have considered Charlie Hoffman if he was playing well, Joel.
Yeah, well, you hit it right there.
As a long shot.
If you can get him in on one of those bets where, first round leader or ahead of someone in the first round, yeah, go for it. But he doesn't seem to, I don't know, this is an endurance issue or something. He can't play all 4 rounds at a major.
It was 8th last year.
Yeah. I was surprised you didn't mention Adam Hadwin. He's, I know he's someone you picked quite a bit. He's in, not the greatest form, but he has a lot of statistically what you look for here.
Chasson Hadley, 4th major, playing a U.S. Open for the first time. Bill Haas, 5th last year at the U.S. Open, was his best finish in a major. Beef's here. Siwoo Kim is here. It's his 4th major. Levy is here. He is 49th in the world. First time. He's never been in the top 50 at the end of year. So he's playing his best golf, even though he's missed 5 of 7 cuts in majors. Shane Lowry, who led the U.S. Open 2 years ago after the 3rd round, and then shot a 76 in the final round for Dustin Johnson to get the win. So he is also one of the long shots. And by the way, Kyle Stanley, no top 35s in major play, so maybe he could break that streak this year. Okay, now we're going to be on the air on Saturday and Sunday, so at 10 a.m. Eastern, Saturday and Sunday. Is that 9 a.m. for you, Joel?
Yes, no, I'm in Eastern time zone.
Oh, you're still Eastern, okay. So 10 a.m. Eastern, Saturday, Sunday. Saturday, of course, we'll recap the first 2 rounds. We'll preview round number 3. We'll give you updated odds and all sorts of analysis to make your picks for the weekend. And then we'll do it again on the final round. Do we have any stats, by the way, regarding? I mean, we kind of know what the whole Masters thing is about. You better be in the final 2 or 3 pairings going into Sunday. Do we know anything about U.S. Open and any sort of trends or anything like that? If you're not on the first page or 2 going into the weekend, or the last time somebody's won a U.S. Open, if they've been trailing by 3 or 4 strokes going into the final round, anything like that? Anybody? No?
The only thing that comes to mind is that it has been a while since somebody has converted the 54-hole lead at the U.S. Open, and I'm just doing that off anecdotal evidence. Brooks Koepka didn't lead last year. Justin Johnson came from off the pace. Jordan Spieth came from off the pace because Jason Day had the lead. Now we're going back to 2014. I guess Martin Keimer would have been the last one to convert a 54-hole lead. He had the runaway, but before that, Justin Rose did not lead going to the final day at Marion.
Interesting.
We know that Webb Simpson didn't lead the 2012 U.S. Open until after he was back in the clubhouse having signed for his final round.
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine winning the event when you've never led when you put in your scorecard, and then you win the U.S. Open.
Only at the U.S. Open.
Best way to win it if you're somebody who's never won a major before, or if you've had problems closing. That's the best way to win it. Sign your scorecard a couple hours early. All right, so we'll see. That's interesting. That means, unlike the Masters, you don't have to. You're not going to see a whole lot of front runners necessarily, especially guys leading at least going into the final round. So if you are leading going into the final round, maybe not a good thing. But we'll talk about that over the weekend. All right, Joel, appreciate it. Get that phone fixed, and we will talk to you again on Saturday. So enjoy the first 2 rounds. Should be fun.
Should be. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. All right, that's Joel Cook, ProGolfWeekly.com. And, by the way, one other name we didn't mention on your picks was Bryson DeChambeau. I was kind of surprised you went with DeChambeau at 40-1. I mean, I'm actually surprised his odds were 40-1 when Paul Casey is 50-1. That sort of thing. I mean, even though I picked DeChambeau to win when he won, I'm still kind of surprised he's 40-1 and that you picked him.
Well, and at that spot, we were starting to run out of names. So, let's put that caveat in there. But I think DeChambeau, I mean, obviously we've seen a great leap in his form over the past year. He's got 5 top 5s in 2018. Oddly enough, he's got 1 of each. So if you're playing poker with golf finishes, DeChambeau is your guy. But he just seems to have figured out how to play even on bigger stages. Memorial, it's not a major, but that field is as good as any. And he was runner-up to McIlroy at Arnie's Place. He's played very well at some very tough venues. Wells Fargo, he played well. And so his game's starting to come together. And in a place where subtlety and danger combine, like Shinnecock, that analytical mind of Bryson DeChambeau might do something.
Keep in mind, too, Bryson DeChambeau had that win, his very first win last year, the week before the Open Championship. He didn't play well on Thursday, which isn't a surprise, and then he was pretty much out of it because of that. But he's got more experience now, second time around after a win. So interesting. I have to remember Bryson DeChambeau from now on, the event before he plays a major. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up. Jeff, we'll look for your first look report on Friday. You'll be previewing which event?
The Travelers Championship, formerly the Greater Hartford Open, long time ago.
We'll see what kind of field they get after the U.S. Open. That's next week here on Prime Sports Golf. But don't forget, we are going to talk to you on Saturday and Sunday for more U.S. Open coverage here on the Prime Sports Radio Network. Follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. We'll let you know when all the shows are available on demand and, of course, our commentary and more. So for Joel Cook, ProGolfWeekly.com, BradyCannonCovers.com, Jeff Shane, and I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you on Saturday.